Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Discerning Gamer. Today we're going to be talking about what will be one of the most high-profile RTS releases in the coming years, Age of Empires 4. At the minute, we've only got a short announcement trailer to look at, but there is plenty of information that I've managed to lay my hands on, which will give us some hints as to how the game will play. So now let's move on and take a look at the people who are in key positions on the development team with Relic on Age of Empires 4. So first up is the game's director, Quinn Duffy. He's a veteran with Relic, and he worked as a designer on Homeworld and Impossible Creatures, two of their most vaunted releases. And from there, he worked his way into a senior designer on Company of Heroes 1. He was then lead designer on Space Marine and a game director for Company of Heroes 2. So he's definitely got the pedigree and has managed to steer clear of Relic's most controversial titles, Dawn of War 2 and 3. I suspect he might be seen as a safe pair of hands that will bring a more classic 90s RTS influence to the project. I can't really see Relic taking huge design risk with Age of Empires 4 after that blew up so badly in their face with Dawn of War 3. Quinn actually said in their recent Homeworld 18th anniversary stream that he could see RTS returning to the classical style of the 90s, specifically saying that's why they're developing Age of Empires 4. In interviews with a German magazine, he stated that he's been watching forums and sees people as saying that developers should go back to the roots of RTS from the 90s, so this may well influence him. He's also mentioned that he isn't the kind of RTS player who can manage really high actions per minute. He likes games that focus on more deliberate decision making, and he was critical of strategy games that you can lose if you make one or two minor mistakes. So next up is the art director, Frank Schlappe. He's relatively new to Relic, but previously worked on Just Cause 3 and Far Cry 2 and 3. And thinking back to those games and reading through his portfolio, I suspect that we'll see an emphasis on the environment and environmental storytelling, as well as juxtaposing contrasting elements to bring out the character in each. Just Cause and Far Cry are both games that were grounded in reality from a visual standpoint, but seem to inject an element of surrealism into the art style and particularly the environments. So I imagine we'll see a fairly realistic style with Age of Empires, which the concept art in the trailer seems to back up, but with some flourishes and exaggerations to set the tone or bring a certain mood. I also imagine there'll be plenty of colours, which all round sounds good to me. So now we'll move on to Carolina Mastretta, who's one of the designers, who seems to be primarily responsible for systems that surround the multiplayer experience, specifically in relation to social and progression systems. In her LinkedIn, she said something that was quite encouraging actually, which was that she wanted to design systems that taught the player how to improve at the game. And that sounds particularly encouraging, particularly from the standpoint of bringing in new players into the multiplayer scene and fostering a healthy player base. She also mentioned identity building mechanisms, which might mean there'll be some sort of cosmetic element to the game, which, if it's done tastefully, could be a cool addition to the multiplayer. She's been with Relic since 2013, so it wouldn't surprise me if she's had some hand in designing the multiplayer progression systems for Company of Heroes 2, which broadly speaking have been done quite well. Bonnie Jean is the narrative designer and a newbie at Relic, but most interestingly she's come from a background primarily working on the Gears of War franchise. So I've only actually played Gears of War 1 and 2, but I did always think that the story was pretty pacey and did a good job of pulling you through the game. I suspect she might have been brought in to lend a more character focused and perhaps action heavy element to the story of Age of Empires 4, and this could work well because often in modern RTS campaigns the characters can be kind of lost, and this is another area where harkening back to past classics like Command & Conquer or StarCraft/Warcraft would probably be quite welcome. Interestingly, Katherine Harefield has come back on as the community manager for Age of Empires 4. She was the community manager for Dawn of War 3, and although obviously she kind of got handed a bit of a turd to work with there, I think she did a pretty good job with what she was given. And obviously she has a sense of humour about the whole thing, bearing in mind her LinkedIn entry for her time with Dawn of War 3, which I'll put up now. Finally, I thought it was worth mentioning the technical director and animation lead, Wilfred and Brent Breedveld. Though it's hard for me to tell how these two will impact Age of Empires 4, I would say it's worth mentioning because they're two pretty key roles and they're going to affect how the game plays, how it feels, and how it performs overall. It's worth noting that they both worked on all the major Company of Heroes 2 DLCs, presumably together, so I'd say that's a fairly promising resume, and again keeps them at arm's length from the dumpster fire that was Dawn of War 3. So, while it's still very early and we're working from very little information, I think we can make some fairly solid guesses as to the general direction the game's going in. In terms of the gameplay design, I think they'll be pretty conservative and stick quite close to the Age of Empires / classic 90s RTS formula, probably innovating mostly around how the units are controlled and work together, and perhaps some new systems around resource gathering and logistics. This will preserve the core of the game, but perhaps make it more accessible to a modern audience. I think we'll see a roster of factions from Europe, such as Britain, Spain, Italy, Greece, and perhaps France and Germany, as well as the native nations of the Americas and Japan. It also wouldn't surprise me if we started the game in the classical age, with the Napoleonic era representing the end of the tech tree. So I hope you guys found this interesting and useful. I'm cautiously optimistic for how Age of Empires 4 will turn out. However, getting burned on Dawn of War 3 has left a bad taste in my mouth, as I'm sure it has for many of you. Let me know your own predictions in the comments below and whether you think I'm on the right track or not. Also, the channel now has a Discord, which I'll link in the description, so hop on there and we can chat about what you'd like to see from Age of Empires 4. Anyway, thank you for watching. Until next time.